Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to Cyberside Chats. My name is Sherry Davidoff,
I'm Matt Duran.
and today we're talking about what everybody's talking about, the Epstein
The
files.
Epstein files, yes.
Because there is a cybersecurity issue. And when there's a cybersecurity issue, we're going to talk about it.
This was inevitable. Like, we knew something like this was going to happen, right?
Yeah. So the Epstein files, some of the Epstein files were released on December 19th. And pretty soon after that, people realized that some of these, first of all, they were very heavily redacted. There were many pages that were entirely blacked out. And so, of course, everyone wants to know what has been redacted?
Right.
What is under all of these big black boxes? And it turns out on a relatively small but significant subset of the files, you could tell. You could, we actually verified this.
We did.
You can copy and paste and just see the actual text. And I actually downloaded the Epstein archive and looked at it with forensic tools, verified that PDF to text utilities will just pull out the text. So even though the stuff you see looks like it's, redacted, it's not visible, it's there under the hood.
It's not the first time we've seen this happen, though.
No.
And basically, the joke that's being made right now is that, somebody who was trying to redact the files basically took a Sharpie and crossed off the letters on the screen of their computer and then figured that was good enough.
Yeah.
That's not quite how these things all work. And I mean, this has been a problem with other documents before. I mean, we've seen this with the Edward Snowden documents and things like that.
Yes.
So yeah.
But I think there are some real implications for all organizations, especially because of AI. This is bringing up issues of redaction, issues of what's under the hood of documents that you may not realize. So, for example, anytime you feed documents into AI or AI crawls them, let's say it's like Copilot in Microsoft 365, it's getting not just the stuff you see, but also a lot of information that you don't. So, information like who's the author, who's
the metadata for the files,
metadata,
right?
what was used to create it, anything that was not properly redacted, even if you can't see it, maybe it can. Things I've seen billing disputes, for example, you can see how long a file was edited, when it was edited, and you can ask AI questions about that also. So AI is getting all of that invisible information that we may not even be thinking about.
Well, this goes back to remember the McAfee interview that Vice did. Do you remember that one?
Years ago. So let's put this in context.
Great
so
example.
John McAfee, who is the founder of the antivirus company McAfee,
right?
He was on the run. I think he was accused of murdering somebody, and he was hiding out. And Vice, he actually did an exclusive interview. It had to be exclusive because he was in hiding with Vice magazine, and they took a picture of themselves, and the headline was something like,
"Hey, we're John
hanging
McAfee
out with John McAfee suckers."
And 30 seconds later, somebody pulled the metadata and they found the actual
photo with the actual coordinates,
with the GPS coordinates within 15 feet of where he was.
And GPS coordinates are among the things that AI can see when it ingests things like photos, unless you are deliberately removing that information. So as you think about your AI policy, what kinds of information it can get, what kinds of information it can't get, think about what's invisible under the hood.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else we want to say about redaction?
Redaction. So
the word of the week.
Yeah, the word of the week.
I think it was CNN.
Yeah, so the big thing here, there was some speculation about licensing through Adobe and some other problems that the government might have had.
Well, Doge cut some of their expenses in part because of Adobe. Some of it was Adobe Acrobat, which does do proper redaction. So there are professional tools that can be used to redact this properly, but clearly somebody was not using one of those tools.
Yeah, and it just comes down to a second check. Just if you're going through and making sure the documents are redacted so that they are, appropriate for public submission. Just make sure somebody else is taking a look to make sure that they can't just wipe the redaction off and uncover everything that you've pulled off at that point.
Yeah, and even if it's not formal redaction software, again, make sure you're sanitizing documents that you feed into AI if you don't want it viewing things like geolocation or other types of metadata that might be part of it. And that includes anything that is processing your photos, for example, on the personal side of things. One thing I thought was interesting was that you found some Epstein-related phishing sites. So part of this is that attackers are going to exploit any attention. So in this case, the Epstein files have a lot of attention, and so they're going to try to piggyback on this. So what did you find, Matt?
So, I mean, if you just go into Google and you run a search for Epstein files or something like that, you'll get links to the appropriate repositories where those files are. Usually it's a .gov account. But there are literally at this point hundreds of other sites that are saying like we have the full Epstein files, and when you click on them, they're either going to try to phish your information or they're going to try to get you to download something that is probably malware.
And we've seen that
Again, yeah. Oh
before.
no, this is very very common. Like because there's so much attention here, and because people are now starting to look everywhere they can for this information, we're seeing people taking advantage of that curiosity, and that leads into, I guess, a couple of other elements that we probably want to talk about here.
Well, it's really important to make sure that any information you rely on is authentic. And
Right,
again, I hate to say it, but getting back to AI, this is a big problem because you can easily get information that you think is accurate but isn't. So we
right.
need to understand, what are we relying on? What is AI relying on? But how can you actually verify the authenticity of information?
Right. So we've talked about this like from a cybersecurity standpoint. There's a few ways that we can do that are pretty technical. I mean, we can use cryptographic checksums or something else like that. But for the vast majority of people who are looking at these documents, those words mean nothing to them.
Oh,
So
you're
yeah,
killing me
I
here.
know, I know,
We
but
have a
like
video on it. We have the tools. It's like Dorothy has the slippers all along or
yeah,
whatever. We actually do have the tools to cryptographically sign things. Same as when you use digital signatures on a document. So we have some videos on that we can link in the show notes for you guys. But less technical approaches, look at the source. Are you going to
right.
justice.gov, or are you going to like Joe random person on the
Yeah,
dark
are you
web?
going to
Because
freedomeagle.blogspot.com or something like that?
yes.
Yeah,
Is that, I don't know if that's a real thing.
I don't know if it is
But
actually, but
yeah,
yeah,
figure out where is this coming from? Is it coming from someone that you trust who has done their own homework? Check the version history. Is it an original release? I often look at the metadata of PDFs. I look at the metadata
yep.
on the Epstein files, and they were like, all the ones I looked at were like shortly before midnight on the 19th. And I was like, all right, that checks out. It wasn't like edited yesterday.
They were scrambling to get them done,
And
but yes,
yes, you can use cryptographic checksums where if Matt signs a document with his private key, I
right,
can use his public key to verify that's his actual signature. That is the right way to do a lot of this. One common scenario where we see this is extortion. If you're hit with a ransomware attack and criminals say, we've downloaded your secret data and we're going to release it, the first thing you should do is not respond. The first thing you should do is say, how do I know this is really my data
yeah.
and that you actually have the data? I mean, Matt, you have worked cases where I
Oh,
know you didn't think that they actually had the data.
oh, yeah, yeah, no, several, and there's a lot of cases where we see, somebody claiming to have stolen data from a company when that data is something that's potentially publicly available or maybe released in a separate data breach or something like that.
Yeah, maybe stolen
Yeah,
from somewhere else. Maybe they don't have any information
yeah,
at
they
all.
may have absolutely nothing. Like my favorite example of that is it was Black Cat that I was dealing with.
The ransomware
The
gang.
ransomware gang, yeah, and they sent us screenshots of the data they said they had, but all you could see was the screenshot. And every time we asked them for proof of the data they were actually trying to extort us with, they just said like, "No, here's the
So
screenshot."
you thought that they had seen the data,
They had
but didn't
seen it.
actually
Yeah,
download
they
it.
had been in the environment. That much was obvious, but
Right.
like they hadn't
They
actually
didn't have the
downloaded
goods.
anything. So yeah,
But that victim still paid the money,
they did end up paying,
like
yes,
thousands and
like
thousands of dollars.
$250,000.
Oh
Yes,
my
but
God.
yeah,
Oh my God. So, yeah, step one is to verify, as to the extent that you
yeah,
can, that it actually is the information you think it is and that they actually have that. That should be part of your incident response playbook.
agreed.
And that's a common scenario.
Yeah,
So, yeah, look for digital signatures. In this case, if someone claims to have your data, you have a copy of it. So, you can use checksums, which help you understand if a file has been
uh,
altered or not.
assuming it's not fully encrypted. So let's add that one. But yes,
Right, but you can run checksums on your own data, and compare that with anything that has been leaked, anything that has been released, or anything the criminals are giving you to, so, quote unquote, prove that they've stolen the data.
right,
And then you can check your checksums against the checksum of the file that has been provided.
fair enough.
So I think bottom line is slow down your decision making if you're not sure if data is authentic or not. It's easy to get very wrapped up in like the Epstein files release, but we
Right.
don't have to take action on that. And
Well, so the other thing we need to talk about here is attention to those files. So obviously, the Epstein files are they're a big media story right now, right?
yes,
And the fact that they are a big media story means that a lot of people are going to be moving to look at them when they normally wouldn't. Like
right.
this is something that we've seen with other I guess certain celebrities previously, where
Oh, when
just
Lady
the
Gaga's information was dumped or
right, yeah,
things like that, people are like, ooh, I want to look at that because it just got dumped. As we know, the best way to get a lot of people to look at something is to pretend to hide it or to
hmm
try to hide it. And that is one thing that happened here also as part of the Epstein document release. There were some documents that were released and for whatever reason were taken back.
Yep.
And that put like the eye of Sauron on them. Everybody was like, what did you just take back?
Good point.
And that is actually a longstanding issue that we've seen in cybersecurity that all of us can learn from. It's happened in data breaches as well.
Yep.
And this was the first time, by the way, this month was the first time I saw a mainstream podcaster use the term Streisand effect. I think in years, maybe like 10 years.
Well, and we've talked about this in like our data breaches class before.
What
But
is
like,
the
yeah, what is
Streisand
the
effect?
Streisand
You should
effect?
all know what the term Streisand effect means. So in 2003, Barbara Streisand had a picture of her house was taken
Yeah.
as part of the California Coastal Records Project. And it was put online. And Barbara Streisand did not like that for her own privacy. She was upset about it.
Sure.
Now, note that 6 people had viewed the image at that point.
Yep.
But she decided to take it to court. She filed a lawsuit because they refused to take down the information.
Wasn't it like $50 million she was suing for or
I
something like
believe
that?
it was
Yeah.
a $50 million lawsuit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she worked really hard to try to get this taken down. It made the news that she was trying to get a picture of her house taken down. And this was, again, part of a bigger coastal records project because she's lucky enough to have a house on the beach.
Right.
By the time everything was said and done, over 1 million people had viewed that picture of her house. And I doubt more than a handful would have beforehand. Probably most people would not have realized that it was Barbara Streisand's
Right.
house. But this put like a big bullseye.
But because
on
yeah,
her
I mean
house.
it's like a big red button on the wall that says
Yes.
do not push this button. Like what's going to happen?
And I think that's what happened in part with the Epstein files.
I think so
that
too, yeah.
Some of these documents were put out. One of them, for example, was a picture of Donald Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell. And that was immediately snatched back. And all of a sudden, the public is laser focused on it, wondering why that image is so important and demanding that it be put back.
Right, right.
So that's the Streisand effect. I can't believe it still lives after 20 some
Oh, of
odd
course
years.
it still
but
does.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
So the bottom line is we really have two sides of the coin with this issue. It can teach us things. So number one, the Epstein files can teach us the importance of understanding what's under the hood when you release information, whether
Right.
you're releasing it publicly or to other members of your organization or to AI tools. What is under the hood? Because AI tools absolutely can view all of that invisible information.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah. And then the second piece of it is how do we authenticate information that we rely on? And again, I think this also relates to the evolution of AI. Like, where does your information come from and how are we vetting it?
Yeah.
So that's the bottom
Yeah,
line.
good point.
All right. What are our key takeaways here, Matt? Want to
Well,
start us off?
we can go ahead and assume that with AI, I mean, all the stuff that's in these documents that you're talking about, the metadata, the underlying information behind them, I mean, humans can see this, but AI can see it a lot faster. So we just kind of have to assume that, especially with AI tools, they will see things that humans don't necessarily take a look at in the, I guess, the initial review
It's
of
not
documents.
visible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything that's uploaded, your metadata behind it, anything that has been potentially redacted if it's not done correctly, all of that is visible to AI and can be very, very quickly, I guess, re-exported out to the user at that point. So
And the actions that we need to take because of that, make sure you are using professional redaction and data sanitization tools, depending on the purpose. So some of it, again, is for redaction where we're actually blacking things out, but sometimes it's about sanitizing information before you feed it into another utility
Right.
for processing.
yeah, no, that makes a huge difference. Difference there. The other thing we have to do is make sure that we are like documenting and enforcing any redaction processes that we're working with.
And authentication processes as well.
Make
So
sure you understand
write
where the
down-
document came from, that it's valid, and that any redactions are going to be actually valid at that point.
I think this is really important, Matt, because things like document sanitization and authentication apply to everybody in your organization, not just IT folks and
Sure.
not just leadership. So everybody needs to understand as part of their training exactly, what can you see? What can't you see? When you release a document, what could be included in it? And then how can we remove any information we don't necessarily want to release?
Right. One of my favorite examples of that, and it's popped up in a couple of forensic cases, is when we get something like a Word document that hasn't been properly sanitized, and we can go back and view like the revision history on the
Oh,
document
yes,
itself.
that's always interesting.
So we can see things that were, included in the document to start with, but weren't meant for actual public release.
Yep.
And that happens more than people think. I would assume at this point anyway, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, make sure you're building that verification into how decisions are made. And again, incident response planning comes to mind first and foremost because often that has to happen fast. And in emergencies, people sometimes just take at face value the information they receive.
Right.
So make sure you're slowing down, you're authenticating information, and any actions you take are actually based on verifiable information.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then finally, and I mean, we need the broken record icon here, but I mean, train your staff for something like news-driven phishing and malware.
Yeah.
If something is a big story in the headlines, then there is, usually going to be some kind of, malicious campaign on the back end trying to get people to click links, give up passwords,
A-
download malware. Yeah,
Advertisements in Google.
exactly,
Yeah.
because it's a big thing. It's a salacious thing. People want to click on those links. They want to read these articles. They want to get access to these documents, which is fine, but they need to know that people are going to take advantage of that.
Yep, and that applies to those of us using work computers too, because people will look for news at work and sometimes
Oh,
it
sure, yeah.
goes to malicious sites.
Yeah, there we go.
So, with that, a lot we can learn from the Epstein redactions.
There we
Thank you so
go.
much, everybody. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on Cyberside Chats.